Kia ora, everyone. We're at episode 185, and I have the man in front of me across the internet that basically inspired me to do this whole bloody thing. Dan, I just started getting into podcasts in terms of listening, and I heard you speak on Joe Rogan, like many, many people did. And you said on that podcast, hey, I've started one. And it was quite synergistic because I chucked it into the phone, was out driving to similar time as it is today, for about 4 a.m., driving to a hunting block not far from where I was living, and started listening to, I think it was you and maybe Lucas having a conversation about every man. And I was like, holy shit, this thing is cool. This is speaking to me. And then I was thinking this last week, once we organized, I was like, why did that speak to me? And I was scrolling back through my blog, and in 2015, I watched a film on Netflix called My Own Man. And that was about a guy nearing his 40s becoming a father to a son, and he was dealing with masculinity and femininity. And I was like, yeah, I hadn't really thought about that too much until then as a Kiwi bloke, and I wrote a blog about the men in my life. So, mate, why did men's work, men's journey, men's identity, where did that start going, I haven't thought about this, and this could be quite useful to think about this?
Yeah, man. Well, I started thinking about it pretty young, and it was really in my early 20s. So I went to college and started traveling a lot, started living abroad, and found myself in Panama with a woman that I was dating then. I was writing a novel, and we were just kind of like having a fucking blast, honestly. And I ran out of money, and I needed a gig. And so we moved back to the United States, moved to Utah, and I'm sitting in an internet cafe in Panama, and saw a job ad for a wilderness therapy guide position, and I didn't know what the fuck that meant. And I thought it was rad because I loved being in the wilderness, and I had sort of a thought that I would be a teacher or work with kids somehow. And less than a month later, I was out in the wilderness carrying a pack that I built out of willow branches that I cut and myself and tied together with elk hide, and hiking across these mountains with a group of, I think it was 9 young men between the ages of 14 and 17. And I stumbled into my fucking calling right then and there, right? I just naively, luckily stumbled, or was guided, right? Depending on how you look at the world. And, I spent 4 or 5 years working with young men in that capacity. And it was just, I got to be a professional big brother, while we were doing these wild adventures. And I also got to start working with fathers and sons specifically. And that was it, man. You sit there around a circle and a fire, and you see like a 17-year-old, like tough guy fall apart and be held by his father. And I've just, there's the amount of tears that fly when fathers and sons find each other and reconnect. There's nothing like it for me, right? And so, and there's definitely a lot we can talk about it if you want, but like my father and my grandfather and my lineage back, right? And I think that obviously plays a huge role for me in this. But practically speaking, in my early 20s, it became my life. It became my world. And I became obsessed with why these young men were struggling, what they needed to be more healthy, more mentally healthy. And then even more so, it was obvious that, these kids were rad. And then their dad would come out, and you could almost watch them 100 yards away, like with so much expectation and hope and like love in their eyes. And as they got closer, they shut down, and then they shut down more, and they shut down more. And then they got together, and they just stood their fucking slack face in front of their children, just being like, like no idea how to love their kids, no idea how to talk to their kids, no idea how to bring their guard down, no idea how to connect vulnerably, any of that shit. It's like, well, that's a fucking problem for a basic, that's like the core of every problem on the fucking planet. So that's one answer.
No, that's good. But before we dive into solving every problem on the fucking planet, uh, what was with the pack? That's a power move, man. Like, hey, how's it going, kids? I made this.
No, so that was the program. No, it was amazing. That wasn't me, man. That was me learning so I work, it was a, what do you call it? Traditional skills or primitive skills based program. So our training is we went out for 10 days and, slept under the stars and learned how to make tarp shelters and learned how to bust fires with bow drills and hand drills. And then we all cut our own stakes for our packs, and everybody was given half of an elk hide, and we made our own packs from that. And it was legit. So that was not me being cool. That was me playing along. And that introduced me to a way of life also that's just become, a massive part of who I am too.
So who was running that? What was the ethos behind that sort of vibe?
So therapeutic wilderness programming, this specific school is part of an industry that tends to be fairly wealthy families whose adolescent children are acting out and hurting and struggling and maybe hurting other people. It's a high dollar therapeutic intervention program. And then generally those students go on to a boarding school, a therapeutically oriented boarding school. And so it's actually a big industry out west in the United States. And I worked for those. I also worked for programs that were state run. And so those were more correctional facilities, right? So kids who were, they had an alternative to going to jail, they would come out in the woods with me.
Mm-hmm. So when you say about a therapeutic boarding school, are they constantly checking in with someone how they're mentally doing, or?
Yeah. So a therapeutic boarding school is a private school, residential private school, in which every student enrolled has a clinical part of their stay, right? So they have a therapist and support systems, and they do mental health and well-being programming as a part of their daily life.
Yeah. So with your sort of juvenile state sponsored stuff, they're at risk in terms of crime. Are these other children at risk in terms of drug and addiction habits and potential suicide? Are they?
Exactly. Drugs, self-harm, sometimes more outward violence, sometimes just really bad mental health, depression, bipolar, things like that. Kind of a wide spectrum, but I think the commonality was often either destructive behavior of some sort, right? Mm-hmm. Whether it was stealing cars and snorting coke, or addicted to video games, or scratching, like self-harm, things like that.
And so on the course, was there any sort of therapeutic base, or that was letting nature be the medicine?
A ton. A ton. I mean, yeah. So the programming, so my role as a guide was to run the coursework, which was, at one program, it would be, over the course of a week, we would hike 5 chunks of about 8 to 10 miles a chunk and learn how to navigate and just full wilderness living. But then every day there would be, a theme, and there would be a circle where we would teach a certain skill, and we would talk about, feelings and emotions and mental health. And it was and then once or twice a week, a trained clinician therapist would come out to the field, meet up and do some sessions. And so it was a very, very intensive process altogether.
And that must have been incredible. How was the energy levels and change of attitudes across 8 miles or so a day?
I mean, you can imagine whatever you can imagine probably happened, right? I mean, sometimes a group would get in sync with each other, and it would just be a total blast, and it would just be fun and exciting. And other days it would be pure fucking hell, like pure hell. One of my favorite memories is I'll obviously not share his name out of confidentiality, but this young man who was legitimately fucking insane, but really awesome. He stole a piece of elk hide, and he built himself a G-string underwear out of elk hide. And then his thing was, when it would storm, one night we camped up right near the peak of this mountain, and when the lightning came, he got out of his freaking tent and in just his G-string underwear and raced to the top of the peak, and then like proceeded to swear at God at the top of his voice, like just raging at God for like 40 minutes straight, just like daring God to smite him with thunder and like to hit him with lightning, and like excuse me, it was bananas. It was really bananas. So
wow, that's for some reason I have images of Paul Stamets up his tree on a
yeah that's a good analog for sure.
So like, where did that fit in with the whole media thing? Was that before or after?
No, that was way before. So yeah, that was my first career, and I did it for a handful of years. And then I wanted another challenge. I actually wanted a higher degree. I wanted to get a graduate degree, right? And so I looked around, and the thing that was most appealing to me was I became a wilderness therapy guide. I'm sorry, that's what I already said. I became a teacher in the Bronx. So I moved to New York City, and I'd never really been to New York before. So that was a pretty big adventure for me. Moved to New York and got into this program where I did a 2-year master's of education, so I became a certified teacher in return for teaching for 2 years in the Bronx. So I did that for a couple years, and that was it was a really important time for me. The work itself was amazing, but I was not okay. Like that was when my own life broke down. That was like the beginning of everything I've done since, was because of a huge breakdown I had, like a mental breakdown that I had that year in New York City, or the second year in New York City. And that kick started like the next chapter, which was, during that time I found my first men's group, which I didn't know existed before then. Started working with a therapist, started doing a lot of things, started meditating, like all of the things that have become very central for me. And shortly after that, I only stayed for 2 years because it was killing me to live there. And I moved back out west, United States, and then I got a call from a dude in my first men's group who was a director, a television director, and they sold this show. They were going to Alaska to climb up this mountain and shoot some deer, and they needed some people with backcountry experience to take care of the crew. So I got invited on a first shoot and performed really importantly well. And then that started a 4 or 5 year career in TV, man. That's how that happened.
You said about someone who can perform well in the backcountry. I think I messaged you about Stephen Ranella and Tim Ferriss talking to you. And New Zealand hunters are very familiar with tussock. We've got tussocks that are 6 feet tall, and and they, especially if there's snow on them, you kind of go and stand on them, and then you end up beneath the tussock. They were calling you the tussock jumper, and they were saying how like you can carry the pack part of the animal and the camera crew and just bound along the tussock. Where'd you learn that skill, man? Because that's
No, I'm a good pack animal, man. I think like I don't think it's true anymore, but for a while, like most of the things that I earned in my life were because I could put a shit ton of weight on my back and carry it well. Like that. But the tussocks, no, I actually don't know. I think that was just I think people are surprised. I'm a pretty big dude, but I'm pretty nimble on my feet too. I'm not like fast or anything. But I don't remember jumping from tussock to tussock. I just remember I don't know. I guess I've just done a shit ton of, I've spent a lot of time in the backcountry, right? So when it comes to uncomfortable walks, I've just done a ton of it. And so I don't know, no magic there, no jumping. I don't think there's any jumping. I just think there was a lot of practice under my belt.
I was talking to a mate, Ryan Nicholson, who's been on the podcast. He said that he was in a bivy bag once and slid down the hill on tussock. I said, well, you can be the tussock sleeper. Like you said there that you're in the Bronx and you had a identity crisis, a mental breakdown. What was sourcing that?
Well, I would say a lifetime of not dealing with my own shit, man, and a lifetime of emotional repression, and just hadn't, like, my skill set that I had built as a young person broke down and wasn't expansive enough to handle life as it was happening. I mean, to be fair, it was really intense, like teaching in inner city and then getting on a train to go to school at night and like earn a master's. So it was like a force function of just being pretty burnt out. And I think that the jump from, leading a 21-day wilderness trip and then having 21 days off to do what I wanted, that lifestyle compared to like living in Mott Haven in the Bronx in New York City and doing that, it was just a big jump. But I think, like, looking back on it, it was an elegant way to speed up my need to grow up, right? My own need to mature and start to go deeper. And I also think that, like, I had a calling, I had a calling towards a more spiritual life, and I had a calling toward a deeper life. And I think it was just kind of like I got grabbed by life. It's just like, all right, dude, it's fucking happening. Like, you're not going to outrun this. You're not going to evade this. Like, it's happening. So and I think a vulnerable part of it too is that I was in a long-term relationship with a woman that I cared about so deeply, and also just wasn't ready to commit and didn't have the courage or any way to know how to navigate that. And part of that was sexual, right? I had been monogamous my whole life, and like some of the darkest shit I've ever done, like I cheated on her and like started kind of like going down a path of, I guess you could easily call it sexual addiction. Just things started to go a bit dark, man. And that wasn't okay. As soon as I like fessed up to what I was doing, it was like everything broke down in me. It was like, this is not who I thought I was, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is totally not who I thought I was. So yeah, it was an intense but important, really important time for me to and to realize, like, at that point I had, I was, fine and functional, and I was able to, be a decent mentor and teacher, like to in my profession and past like that. But when it was the first realization that how I was raised, like, we didn't talk about our insides, right? We didn't delve very deep. We didn't really express much emotion, and that just broke down. Like, that just broke down for me.
So where did the confrontation come from? Was that internal turmoil, or did that drive you to get to the men's group and the therapy, or was that all sort of running in parallel, and then did you have to ever sort of say that out loud, that I'm not who I aspire to be?
I absolutely did. And I don't think I've ever shared this before, but I grew a big batch of psilocybin mushrooms and went upstate, and we did a ceremony, and I laid on the floor, and I was sitting with my back against the wall, and this face or being or entity came right up in, like, and so I'm just tripping balls, right? My eyes are closed, but like, as soon as it came up to me, I like felt it in my whole body. It's just like, you have to fess up, you have to share. You can't, like, tell. I think the words it said would tell her. And so I got up and I puked. And then the next day I fessed up to her and myself and everything. And it's just like,
yeah. And so did that sort of shatter a lot of pillars that you'd built?
Oh yeah, every one. It was complete. It was a complete meltdown of who I thought I was.
Mm-hmm.
So that was pre-men's group. That was pre-therapy. That was pre-anything, right? That was the breakdown that started things off.
Mm-hmm. And so how did they come into your life?
Pure luck. Pure luck. I went to a dinner party with a dear friend in Queens, and there's a man there named Peter, who invited me to his men's group. And there's like 3 moments, man, like 3, maybe I'll only remember 2. But like when I was in that internet cafe in Panama and I saw the wilderness therapy thing, and the first thing was like, oh, I've never heard of that before. And then I was at this dinner party and Peter told me, it was like, oh, I've never fucking heard, like literally never entered, like no clue this thing existed. And so yeah, he invited me to a men's group and I went like the next week or the week after that, and it fucking changed my life completely. And that really began my next wave of obsession in terms of, I mean, first of all, my own well-being and my own internal states, but then also very, very quickly and obviously was clear that this shit worked powerfully and quickly. And it was very clear that I was terrified to tell anybody that I was in a men's group. And so those 2 things became my obsessions. Like, hold the fuck on. Why does this work so well? And why are we all so scared to talk about it? And then I chewed on that for 5 years before we started Everyman.
And so what was, you said you heard about it at a dinner party and it was kind of like, I don't know what that is, to then get up the courage to go along to it. What was the elevator pitch, man? Because to, ruminate on that for 2 weeks and get there and then find out it's worth, like, it's a great thing. Yeah, because change is hard.
Yeah, it is. I think the real answer to that is not very special. I think it's just that I think all of that time in the wilderness as a young person, I learned to trust my gut completely. Mm-hmm. I just learned to trust my gut all the way. And there's not often that I second guess or doubt, like, not that I can't be confused or fucked up. I can all the time, but when I slow down and when I can feel something very clearly, I trust it. Right. And so I tend to say, I tend to say yes to a lot of things and I tend to trust shit. Right. I kind of go with it a lot. And that just felt right. That's actually it. It just felt right. It felt like the right thing. I was scared, nervous, didn't know what I was getting into. I don't remember the pitch. It might have just been, hey, we get together every week and, hold each other accountable, or I don't even remember. But I know how it felt leaving after the first night. And it was that I have never been in a room of men that I admire and respect so much. And they are here willing to like stand behind me and mentor me and like be a peer with me. And I saw an image of myself in that moment, this like broken down 28-year-old dude. And I was the youngest by far, right? And all these guys were like millionaires and fucking like ballers and TV directors and, and handsome and fit. And it's just like, who are these guys? Like, yes. I'm like, yes, I could be a part of this type of community. It was just like, it was a really big deal. It was a really big deal.
Yeah. When you said there, sort of following your intuition, following your gut in nature, I immediately think of, getting off the track and trying to follow trails and stuff like that. And then just the open and amazing areas you find, and then you kind of find animals and you kind of go, well, I'm looking for a needle in a haystack. You look over the whole wilderness and you go, they could be anywhere. And then you manage to find them. And it's taken me a while to start to do that a little bit. But is that the sort of thing you're vibing on?
I do. I think about it in terms of that much quiet and that much living in tune with the natural rhythms and the elements and all of that. I feel like I got a master's degree or that's not even fair, way more than that in meditation, in presence, in self-awareness, in somatic awareness, being aware of my body. Not so much emotions, that came later for me, but the being quiet enough to hear like the deeper voices in me and maybe it was there before the wilderness too, but it was finally just quiet enough to hear it. But yeah, awakening of just this primal intuitive sense, you know, of yes, no, like safe, not safe, good, bad.
Mm.
But yeah, it lines up to tracking for sure. You know, I think that um I guess I think of like the I mean, sometimes so if I'm out in the woods now, you know, it really does require me to get into a receptive state. There's a couple ways I can be in the woods. One is I'm going to get from here to there, and I'm just going to put my head down and I'm going to hump, right? I'm going to hoof it and go. And that's not a super receptive state, right? But I think once I get from A to B and I make the decision to just, okay, I'm just going to be here. And that's actually my favorite thing to do in the entire world, is to just be in nature without an agenda. Or to meditate outside is a specific way I do it. But um yeah, there's just something else that happens, right? It's just a very, very um reliable mechanism to find and be a part of the deeper sense of self, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And not even just sense of self, but a sense of more a participatory way of being, you know.
Yeah. You said there that you hadn't really found the emotional side of it. Like I've been listening to you, what is it now? Nearly 4 years. And sort of that's been my emotional journey with that. I've had, the birth of my daughter and things, and then the sort of almost loss of that family unit and that story, and have found that emotional ramp go up, and then to be in the mountains and look around and be in awe and feel all of a sudden has been pretty amazing. What was the difference, do you think, of finding your emotion and being out of nature again? What did you notice what the difference was?
Absolutely, yeah, that's a big deal. And then just to name where the emotions came online for me was after that all happened in New York. I moved out west and I met Owen Marcus, who's one of the co-founders of Every Man with Me. And he taught me, he brought me in his men's group. And that, like, next stage of total changing my life. But I think the question here is, right, so once that's online, what is different about being in nature? Is that yeah, that's actually maybe the best question. Can we just like talk about that for 3 days? I actually would like to I would actually like to write a book about that. And I'm actually considering writing a book called How to Be in Nature. And it's not actually a how-to, but that's just a clever title for it. But so here's the best way I can explain it. I feel like, when I started doing the wilderness stuff, these kids would be sent out on these 120-day trips, right? Long time, big chunk of time outside. And over that course of 120 days, you would feel like when part of their psyche relaxed, right? And they showed up and they were more present, and it took that time. And I actually think the value of just being outside for that much time at once is immense, right? And you could see it and feel it. I could feel it myself. I could feel it in the students. But I feel like an accelerant to that journey. And so by the end of 120 days, people are pretty present, people are pretty in tune, pretty in touch with their bodies, pretty there. But what I found is the same type of protocols and practices that help us connect with each other help us connect with nature on a much more rapid scale. So I think like the minimum effective dose of time outside can shrink substantially if you know how to slow down your mind, if you know how to relax and feel your body, if you don't have blocks or roadblocks in front of each of your emotions, if you've cultivated the capacity to feel awe and feel joy and feel fear and feel all of the things, then you get out there and you're just more your consciousness is more naked, right? You're just more nakedly aware and open. And shit, if that's not psychedelic, I don't know what is. To really be present in nature. And
that is powerful. It brings up all types of thoughts. I know especially doing weekend missions, I'm quite lucky. There's a range right there. It takes about an hour and a half to get out to that range, and roughly an hour down to the other range. And on a weekend mission, and it's funny you talk about that minimum effective dose. My time to relax now is getting quicker and quicker, and I think that's probably partly of experience. But I remember I came back from Australia, had a lot going on with my relationship at home, and getting out there, and I'm quite with my optometry world, I'm quite involved, sort of in touch with parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system, that fight or flight, rest and digest. And I would need to go to the toilet like 4 times in the 6 kilometer walk. And I'm like, man, I am jacked up. And I just have that like shiver going on. That's where my nervous system was at, because I was terrified without being terrified. And it's sort of also analogous with doing Wim Hof, like trying to be relaxed while also trying to be jacked up. It just creates these, what you guys talk about, that somatic experience. And I think having your words in the back of my head, occasionally I'd again listen to a Everyman podcast on the way out and just be, like, say, find that presence in your body and go, what's going on here? Mm-hmm. And then opening up that scope. And another analogy is I've done a couple of low-level boxing matches, and the first time I had complete tunnel vision. The second time I sort of started off a little bit broader, and by the end of the 3 rounds I was more open to my surroundings. So yeah, it's quite funny. Are you still there, Dan? You've frozen on me.
Are you recording just with Zoom, or are you recording with a different program?
No, just with Zoom. Yeah. I just use that audio track. Yeah. So where did you lose me? I heard you say yes to that sort of tunnel vision to expanded vision of boxing.
Yeah, no, I just think it's exciting to talk about, right? It's the ability to relax as higher levels of intensity occur has a lot of applications that are very positive.
Yeah. So you said that Owen taught you how to feel, like, and I sort of think if anybody wants a crash course on it, just listen to the Everyman podcast back catalogue, because I learned a shitload. What was the journey like with Owen? And like he's on a number of those episodes as well, so people can get a little bit of insight.
Yeah, and just go to everyman.com and get in there, right? That's where you learn that stuff. So I joined his men's group in Idaho. I just remember the first meeting I was there, it was my turn to go. And like they asked me what I was feeling, and it felt like they were speaking Russian, or I'm like, I have no fucking clue. No idea. And so, Owen lays out in the Everyman, they lay out 5 basic emotions and they named them. And they're like, well, which one, dude? Which emotion are you feeling? Like, I don't know. I was pretty locked up. I was pretty emotionally locked up. And so, it was just a process of being guided into what I was obviously feeling, but not aware of and not allowing to feel, right? And I tend to go through things pretty intensely and quickly. And so, I think I sat in this group for maybe half a year or something before I moved back to New York. And that was like getting the world's best emotional oil change. Like I just learned a whole new part of life in myself, and got pretty passionate about it.
Yeah. And so how did you connect the two? Like there's a wheel out there that's kind of like, you say, 5 emotions, and outside of that is narrowing those down, 3 emotion, each emotion down into sort of 3 parts. And then what does that look and feel like I thought that tool was pretty good for the emotionally stunted. Like, oh, my breath is short. Oh, you could be one of this group of things. And
Yeah.
well, yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's helpful. I think the other thing that is helpful is doing it in a community or in the presence of others, because people who are not emotionally stunted can tell what you're fucking feeling.
Mm.
Like, are you sure you're not just really sad? It's like, and but that points to like part of the beauty of that in general, and why the everyman stuff is so valuable and effective, is that our one of our fundamental languages as humans are our emotions, right? They are a primal part of how we communicate with each other, and they're not necessarily solitary experiences, right? So we feel when other people feel, right? Other people feel when we feel, right? And there's this exchange, and when we don't allow ourselves to fully accept and embrace wherever we are. So this is not just emotionally, but this is the experience in general. Like anything that I'm experiencing, like I can put the skids on it, I can lock it up, and then it kind of, it doesn't transmit very cleanly, right? It's like the radio station is halfway in between, and it's all fuzzy and weird. But if you just surrender to what you're feeling, that's really what it is. You surrender to the experience you're having. Your natural system processes that thing you're feeling as it's designed to do, your body, mind, and everything, right? It is a natural digestive system of experience. So it does that, which is great. And it also clearly communicates to other people. And there's this idea of coherence between your inner state and your outer state. And so it's just a practice, it's an incredible practice of dialing that in, so that your own awareness of your inner state and your outer state begins to naturally come together. And then how you show up to other people is very, very, very different in a positive way.
It's fascinating that you use the word. It's a natural digestion, and of course there's that you've spoken about it already. That gut feel, and more sort of physiologically, the vagus nerve. We can influence it so much, and listening to people like Andrew Huberman, he's just rabbiting on about all this technical feel, but that intuitiveness, the gut feel, the processing, like you're sort of all bringing it around to what you can experience. And that's quite funny. And it's interesting, you're sort of saying how you can be the person in the room that doesn't acknowledge it or locks it up and puts the skids on, and there's sort of some tension to the room. But
Exactly.
when we find that little bit of courage to, because we know there's some resistance there, if we allow ourselves to push over that tension, that fear, or whatever it is, the locking up, the energy in the room comes down. Because
Exactly.
as you say, you interact feelings with what's in the room, and when you start to align those and bring them on the wavelengths and things, it's all those words that
And
come
it's
out quite
powerful.
naturally. Yeah,
exactly. And it's more powerful interpersonally than our rational mind is. If we're talking about interpersonal things,
yeah.
like, why do you think we go to fucking movies? Because of the emotional journey. Why do you think commercials, cause us to spend billions of dollars? Because of the emotion embedded in it. Why do stories make meaning for humans? Because of the emotional, that's our language of humanity, right? And then we get confused and think that our rational orientation is our only language, but it's ignoring like the fucking giant elephant in the room that's always happening,
So I guess that must be some of the power of the men's group. Like you said, you've got that experienced elders. It's quite a primitive setup, but then you've got that reciprocity within the room. And if they're modeling something that looks attractive, like you said, you sat in that room and go, "Who are these guys?" And then they were able to show you something that's, like I say, it bloody works.
Well, it really does work, and it works quickly. And another reason it works is because if somebody feels, let's just say, grief around the passing of a loved one, I lost a loved one, but didn't grieve it.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, their feeling sparks my feeling, and then now all of a sudden I get to refeel that and process. Or it's a collective healing process that's incredibly powerful. And yeah, it's fucking works.
So you see the sort of energy sync of fathers and sons coming together. You know, if we can fix that, we can solve most of the problems in the world. You know, you've spoken about your connection with your father in the Everyman podcast. Why did it sort of take so long, and how's that journey now?
That's a good question. I want to address the first part first because it's what I spend a lot of time right now thinking about, and it's not that, you know, the biggest problem in the world is how fathers show up with their children, but I feel like it's an open door to a possible way to influence a lot of other big problems such as misogyny, racism, environmental degradation, how we're treating the planet. And that might seem like a big leap, but stick with me for a minute, then I'll get to my dad. And so my sense right now is that for the human race to potentially find some sort of sustainability and equilibrium and healthful balance with this planet, there's an off ramp we need to take. We need, and hopefully technology can help, but I think there's also a an off ramp in how we're approaching the world, approaching each other, and approaching ourselves, right? And so I do believe that, I don't go around using the term patriarchy all the time, but I'm just going to call it for what it is. Like the system of humanity of dominating things and dominating people is still very, very, very in place. And I do believe that the concepts of masculinity and maleness and manhood are right at the center of that. And I think that what I've observed in the past 15 years working with men is that a kinder way of being that treats women better and people that are different than us better and the planet better does come to pass through this owning and softening and embracing the world, embracing our inner parts that have been pushed off on men, right? Men have pushed them off, culture has pushed them off of men. And so I just want to sort of hit on that, and I'm still sort of formulating my language and my messaging around it, but I do think that men healing their own inner world is one of the only effective ways to truly make a sustainable shift for a big leap toward the better on this planet. I feel very strongly about that. Now it's not just about fatherhood, but I do think that fatherhood is central to that story because it is where we learn and observe what it means to be a man, right? Not everybody has a dad, right? So it's not true for everybody, but by and large, that's how it is, And yeah, my dad and I mean, I've told the story a bunch. My dad and I think lately I've just been feeling a lot of gratitude to him. He's always been my biggest fan, always. Right. I was in martial arts as a kid, and he drove me to practice, in the middle of fucking winter for years. And when I played football, he was like the proudest dad in the stands, and he backed me through all my crazy shit, all the wilderness stuff, all the, going to South America to do ayahuasca. It's like moving to New York City. He flew with me to New York City. Just, he always had my back. And, but there was just such a big gap between, we couldn't talk to each other, right? We loved each other, but it was so uncomfortable. And I kind of hated being around him. It was just this push-pull thing. I wanted to be around him. I loved him, but I couldn't be around him. And there's just so much in between us. And um, yeah, he came to a retreat a couple years ago, and that all went away. It just all went away. And how is it now? I mean, it's good and it's up and down, and it's like a normal human relationship, right? Like we have coffee on the phone, and we have good talks, and there's been a lot of strife and struggle in my family, so it's been hard too, you know. um, but I feel all the way clear and rested. Like if I died tomorrow, if he died tomorrow, I feel clear, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been so instrumental. So a lot of my work now, I'm focusing on fatherhood. Like I'm really lit up by it, and I feel like you know, who I'm working with regularly now are, I've got it down to like a very specific person. It's like a 38 to 44-year-old father, usually two or three kids, successful at work, doing really well, and opening up to a real spiritual journey. Right, that's my sweet spot. And I just think it's, I don't know. I'm, you know, I have two kids, two boys, 5 and 2, 4.5 and 2, and you know, I take it as a sacred opportunity. Really, I do, really, truly do. You know, it's like, what else? I kind of, I feel like a caveman. I really do. But like, what else am I here for? Honestly, like.
For you, you're saying about a little bit of the turmoil of the last few years. How has it been? Have you found yourself better able to ask your father for advice? For like, hey man, what would you do in this situation? Or is there still that element of, I got this, I can do this?
Yeah, that was never really, that's a good question. That's not really the dynamic. I feel like, I think on some practical stuff, like my dad's gonna help me start brewing mead, you know, and he's especially good at that. And I'm happy, you know, I'll easily take his advice and stuff like that. But I think, to be totally honest, I don't find myself going to him for advice very often.
And so, what you're saying about that specific man that you're working with now, what are they generally seeking? If you could sum up what people seek from you.
Yeah, to like quell the existential fear that they're not doing a good enough job with their kids. You know, and to figure out how the hell to do it all at once. You know, how to like find meaning and room for like spiritual growth and self-worth amongst a wild, like, I mean, it's a big job these days, you know, the professional world plus the family world. And yeah, they just, I think the commonality is they want their kids to find what they are finding now at 40 or 50, to have that the whole time, right? To like, just like, I think a lot of what I've been doing with a lot of these dads are kind of like reconnecting to the fundamental reasons, right? You know, like feeling that love for their children more, you know, feeling their feeling what was passed on from their dad or their parents. And you know, doing like, I think the urge, actually, well, one other thing that's common is the urgency, right? So when you become a father, and there's a lot more at stake. When I was 28 and I was first in men's groups, like, you know, it was a good thing for me to go do my own work. Now it's fucking critical, right? Like the kids are here. If I haven't been on my game, it's like, I can see the destruction daily, you know, so I have to get better now.
What does distraction look like? Is it your reactivity? Is it the organizational system of the house, or what's destructive to you?
I mean, it's different for everybody. For me, it would be, me turning off, like, me feeling overburdened and shitty and victimized, and then like not acknowledging it and just walking around like a shithead and letting the whole house stink like my shit, you know? Or speaking to my wife in an unkind way, right? Or, and that is destructive, you know? That's not good.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think what you're speaking to as well is you spoke about that gratitude to your father, is where we are evolving, and people might argue that it's slow. We have, through our lineages, created enough room and momentum to be able to address these things, which is amazing. We're always the luckiest generation, and
Yeah.
for us, like you said, for us as I'm 32 and the guys you're dealing with are older again, for them to now be in a position to go, what I want for my children is to be able
Exactly.
to engage with this, whereas before us, what I want for my children is to be able to get tertiary education. Before that was, what I want for my children is to have skills so that they can foster this world, and probably not much before that was, let's survive.
Exactly, right? Exactly. Yeah. That's there's so much wisdom in what you just said. It's not a it's not a place that everybody gets to. It took me a long time to get to that place. It's so easy to walk around being pissed at your parents. Right? I mean that's what I've seen. It's really easy to be pissed at your parents. It's a lot harder to accept the reality of what happened. And like, what's the quote? I just heard this yesterday, like something about how forgiveness is letting go of all hope for a different past or a better past. Forgiveness is letting go of all hope for a better past, right? And what you're naming, like looking at it from a generational standpoint, I think makes it really possible for real forgiveness and understanding and letting down some of that stuff, right? Because I mean, my dad crushed it. He crushed it. Like I'm pretty good, doing pretty good, always have been. He really did an incredible job.
Yeah, and it's funny you're talking about the supportiveness of your dad and things like that. And I'm the same. Like, he was getting up to take me to swimming, then he'd drive me all the way to town, then he'd drive all the way back out past our house to the river to coach rowing. He'd do that 4 mornings a week. He'd drive me to Dunedin, so it's like a 2.5-hour drive, which in New Zealand's a long way. And, I don't know what he'd do for the hour or hour and a half that I have football training, a bit soccer football, and then he'd bring me home, and and he'd be there when I didn't make the team. He'd be stoked when I did make the team, and so like I say, it's just amazing how much people give up. And I was listening to a conversation between a professional rugby player and a guy that did well in rugby and took him around the world, and now he's doing well in business and passing that on for others to be involved with sport, to get those learnings out of sport. And it's funny you brought up that like significance and who we are as people. Yeah, his vision is that sport can help that foundation, and yeah, it's cool that you say, you can have gratitude for your parents, or if it's not your parents, the people in your life, and having opportunities to be exposed to other people in your life, then it's powerful. And then I think at its core, that's what men's work is trying to do, like get those little accountability partners, work through those things together, and bounce the ideas off each other, but have the framework that, hey, this is open. And so if you're showing up to this, it's kind of like a buy-in, isn't it? Showing up's a buy-in.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Yeah.
Were you at first intimidated, or was it just exciting?
By which part?
By the first time you showed up to the men's group in New York, and then again with Owen and out west.
Oh yeah, crazy intimidated, super intimidated. Yeah. Yeah, especially the first one, I think was, I mean, it is intimidating, it's intimidating by nature to sit in a circle of a bunch of dudes you don't know, right? I think we're pretty wired pretty deep with a lot of competition and aggression, right? Like it's not a normal thing. It's not how we've lived our lives, except for maybe sport, right? Maybe sport is where we did. So for some people, maybe it's super normal, to sit down and be in that space. But for a lot of men, it's very, very not normal. So I think I felt the gravity of what was happening without understanding it. But yeah, I was super intimidated, but also really compelled, which is a good combination, right? To be really intimidated but really compelled. I feel like that's kind of a sweet spot to be in.
Now sitting on the other side, can you sort of appreciate the sort of primitiveness of sitting in a circle of strangers who are men? Like you brought up the word, the aggression of it, or the sort of potential violence of it. Can you now observe like their intimidation coming out and see the different type of man that they might be? Say you say they are the football one. Do you get more of a staunching and a sort of prouding up, and then do you also see the opposite of the closing down nature and the looking up and kind of deer in the headlights type eyes type thing, like what am I doing sort of thing? Do you see those behaviors coming out, those primitive?
Yes, I think so. Not too much. You don't see much posturing or aggression. I think it's mostly intimidating. I think most people are pretty intimidated, but it goes away quickly. It goes away quickly, right? It's like as soon as somebody opens up and sort of shares. I mean, I guess I can't say that for everybody. It goes away quickly, but I think that there is that sort of sense of both intimidation or expectation or like electricity, but it quickly becomes compelling. Maybe that's the right way to say it. It kind of quickly becomes compelling, being like, oh, okay, holy shit, I get it, right? Like this is a man's first sort of step into an arena of that sort is tends to be remembered quite clearly.
And so what was the contrast of moving back to New York?
I got to I guess when I moved back to New York, that was when I was doing the TV program Meat Eater, and that became the greatest time of my life. I mean, not better than now with my children and my wife and everything, but that was like I found a way to live in that city that was just absolutely like perfect and blissful. I had a sweet apartment in Brooklyn, and my job was that we would be on trips around the world in the wilderness, 150, 180 days a year. And then I come home and was a single guy in the city, and like just fucking had a blast, like a total blast. So if the first time I was in New York broke me down, the second time certainly built me back up all the way.
Did you get to New Zealand with him?
Yeah. We did a big 2.5, we did about a 3-week trip on the southern island, lake. What's like one of the famous lakes?
Tekapo or Pukaki, Wanaka. Tekapo. Yeah.
I think Tekapo. We were close there. I mean, we did all the things, man. We did a stag hunt, we did a tar hunt, we did a chamois hunt, we did a boar hunt.
Was the stag hunt when Steve caught up with Remy Warren? Was that that trip? Cool. Yeah. Yeah.
I think that those run of episodes, the New Zealand episodes that we did are I'm gonna brag, some of the best fucking television ever made. Like I think they are. I mean, I think they're our best. That was, I thought, our best work, and they were like legit adventures.
Yeah,
it was so fun, man. Yeah.
I had to laugh, and us here as Kiwis are always a bit protective that we're not Australians, and so because that group of episodes was down under, it starts off with Steve in New Zealand with a didgeridoo playing. Everyone was just like, "Oh man, we're not Australians." No, it was classic, but yeah, it was down under. Yeah, so for you, with every man, there was a hope to get down to Australasia, and you had some dates planned for Melbourne and things. Is there you as Dan Doty? Is there still plans to get on down here?
I mean, potentially, man. I have some good friends over there, and I've just launched a program for men's coaches. So it's a mastermind and training for professional men's coaches, and I think 3 of the guys so far signed up are from Australia. Nobody from New Zealand yet, but yeah, man. I mean, I would love to. I think if it lines up business wise and it makes sense. I mean, I had the time of my life in both, separate trips to New Zealand and Australia. I would like to spend more time. I'd like to bring my family back. I'd like to do some extended time in both places. And yeah, I have good friends in Melbourne and Sydney, and a couple folks in New Zealand I'd love to see too. So I would like to. No plans now, man. I mean, things are pretty online oriented these days,
Yeah. And where are you based now?
We just bought a home in Maine, on the coast of Maine, on the east coast of the United States. Yeah.
So you're getting out of winter. Is that right?
Yeah. Very much actively getting out of winter. Yeah. Just this week has been, we moved here right as winter started, which wasn't like the best way to move to a place, right? So just this last week, I've been out climbing in the hills and just honestly starting to fall in love with this place. It's a pretty special place.
Yeah, the beauty of the internet is I follow a few people in Maine, and it does look pretty cool for me.
Who do you follow in Maine? I'm curious.
There is a guy that does home pig butchery. He's pretty cool. And then Ryan Mickler, I think, is up there in Maine.
Oh yeah. I saw him move to Maine too.
Yeah. So yeah, that's my exposure to Maine, I guess. No, and I often get accused of being a bandwagon jumper, but in terms of if I sit down and watch NFL, I do like the Patriots. So
there you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
See, that's my connection. Dan, my sort of, well, first, where do we find you? Yeah, it would be good. Yeah, of course.
Yeah. DanDoty.com. Very straightforward. DanDoty.com, and then I'm on Instagram too.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to find the bastard who has DanDoty.com so I can take it. But I'm Daniel Doty on Instagram. So
yeah, Daniel Doty. Cool, man. So yeah, my closing question is, what is in your life something that continually shows up? So it keeps you in flow, it keeps the wheels turning, and if it's not there, things are a bit messy. It can help you get back on track. It could be like a quote or a way that you live your life, just something that sums up the positive in your life.
I'd say the quiet that comes in my meditation practice, and it doesn't have to come through meditation, but it's that space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's that open space. Yeah.
So the quiet and open, is that right? Quiet
and open. Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, Dan, this has been awesome. As I said, you're actually the reason I started doing this, and this is pretty cool. It's always funny. I tend to, those like 5 and 10 episodes, they tend to end up with something significant. And yeah, this one for me has been massively significant, and it's awesome to share your work and what you do and how you think about things with us down here in New Zealand. And yeah, I know there's a few people out there within New Zealand that are trying to work in this space as well. Hopefully this reaches them, and yeah, they can also grow and learn from you. And yeah, we share this message of getting in touch as men and being, we're always trying to be better, but yeah, here's another tool to be better. So thank you so much for giving up your time and chatting with me. And yeah, I appreciate it and appreciate all you do.
Yeah, you're welcome, man. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it too.
Legend. Cheers.